What is up, everyone? Welcome to part 3 of the 2021 FantasyPoints.com virtual powwow. We're going to cover the AFC today and tomorrow. Here to wrap it up here, I am John Hansen from FantasyPoints.com. The usual cast of characters are here with us in the room, and we just chop it up and we cover all 32 teams. We discuss roles and position battles and Greg Cosell's film review, Graham Barfield, fantasypoints.com, of course, Joe Dolan, and Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan. Greg Cosell brings with him the film analysis, player breakdowns. Mr. Caplan can do it all, but he is kind of our insider NFL information man. And without any further ado, I'm not even going to ask the guys how they're doing because I know they're doing well. So it's June.
How do you know that, John?
What's that, Greg?
How do you know that?
I could tell from your body language. I'm real big on that.
Okay.
You know, I could see you're in a good place today. I can feel it.
You feel it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Plus you got that blue sweater. It's kind of very cheerful and uplifting, you know, after a very bad weekend here in the Northeast.
I wasn't in the Northeast, so
I know. I know. Right. I'm the one who's morose and lugubrious about not going outside, basically. I
was actually in LA this weekend.
Oh, I know. How was it?
It was awesome.
Let me guess. The weather was perfect.
Yeah, it was, it wasn't bad being in Santa Monica.
No humidity?
About 68. It was kind of nice.
Yeah.
Is this a work related thing out there, or
little Steve Clarkson quarterback retreat?
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, we could do a whole podcast on Greg's trip to LA. Maybe we will. Maybe we'll get into the details, but we're going to cover the AFC East here and the AFC North in part number 3 of the powwow here. And again, it's a think tank. It's just a conversation. It's fairly informal, and we're going to do it as we did last year on the live stream here and let you be a fly on the wall. Essentially 2021 Buffalo Bills. We start there in the AFC East, the kings of the division, 13-3 last year, second in points for, and a solid 16th in points allowed under Sean McDermott. And well, Greg, let's go right to you. We tend to start with you. We did have, at least I did, Josh Allen as like my guy this past year. That said, didn't see this coming, completing nearly 70% of his passes, Greg. It was obviously a monumental leap. What stood out to you about the leap mechanically, decision-making, comfort level, poise? I'm sure all those things did, but what stood out to you, and do you view it as a sustainable asset, if you will, what he really excelled at last year?
Yes, I do. And there's not much to say about Josh that hasn't been said. I think if we're going to look at the Bills from an overview, because ultimately we don't need to say Josh Allen is good, and we don't need to say that they're a passing team and that he's going to put up numbers. We know that, John, right? I mean, that's not news. So, I think the question for people is what they are offensively, because people might be thinking about the back situation. They're not going to change their offense. This is what they are. They're not going to spend draft capital on backs. They're fine with who they have. They're good. This is what they are. They're a passing football team. I mean, they've got Davis, they've got Diggs, they've got Beasley, they have Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, they're not going to change who they are and what they are. This team is built around Josh Allen.
Well, that said, Adam, I understand certainly what Greg is getting to, but is it fair to say that we need a little bit more contributions from the backfield, and specifically Zach Moss. I understand totally what Greg is saying, but they only ran the ball like 16 times a game with the running backs. That even seems high.
Well, there's a reason they don't run it well.
Yeah.
It's not.
Right.
It's yes, they want to put in Josh Allen's hands, no question. But I could tell you they were frustrated with the run game. When you run it, you like to be able to run with better effectiveness. Zach Moss, he had before the toe injury, he just didn't look like he did in the preseason in training camp. So the hope is that he could seize the job. I mean, he's more of a grinder type who could maybe sustain the run game. That's their hope. Breida's there as a changeup. Devin Singletary clearly has shown he's not a starting running back. The hope is he's not. I think if we're being honest here, if Singletary's their starting running back, whatever that winds up being in terms of carries, clearly Zach Moss didn't look good in training camp and the preseason because it's all his. The job is there for him to take. Let's put it that way.
Greg, back to you. It does kind of feel like Zach Moss. Now he did have that toe problem, which probably slowed him down, but it did kind of feel like Moss is that case of guy needs volume. Granted, pass happy offense, but Zach Moss, as Adam mentioned, grinder, needs some volume, but not really excelling enough with the few opportunities to get said volume. And again, maybe he never gets it, but what'd you see out of Moss last year?
Well, I think let's just play off what Adam said for a second. I think they want to run it better. I don't necessarily think they want to run it significantly more in terms of volume. When they do run it, they want to run it better. But this is not going. I don't believe that their run-pass ratio or their offensive foundation is going to change. Now, Moss is clearly a grinder. Now, they still have the personnel to line up with 10 personnel, meaning 1 back and 4 wide, which they did more than any team in the league a year ago. I don't think that's going to dramatically change. I think what they're hoping is with their spread offense, with 4 wide receivers on the field, that their run game can be more effective. Now, we can debate Devin Singletary. No one would argue he's a foundation back. They know that. Does Moss have theoretical foundation back traits? Maybe, but he's not going to be used that way. They just want to run it better, John. They're not going to run it significantly more in terms of volume.
One thing too, though, I will say they did win 13 games last year. It would be nice to use him as a closer, fourth quarter.
Well, that's a different question. No, right. Now, would there be games, hey, if they're ahead, where Moss, if he's the closer, and he certainly has better closer traits than Singletary, that's no question. So maybe would there be games, if that's the case, where he ends up with 15, 16, 17 carries? Yes. But their game plan is not going to be, we want Moss or Singletary to be a feature or quote unquote even a primary back, John.
Yeah, I mean, clearly not after the season that Josh Allen had. That would just literally be.
And I had a chance to talk to Carson Palmer this weekend for quite some time, and he works with Allen. Amazing how my brain just, I guess being in the sun, my brain.
You mean Jordan Palmer? Jordan Palmer, right?
Did I say Carson?
Yes.
Yeah.
I talked to Jordan Palmer. Yes. Yeah. See, I'm totally, long flights, LA. I mean,
jet lag.
Totally confused.
Welcome to my world, Greg. Welcome.
I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, John.
That's me all 17 weeks during the season.
Yes. And he was just talking to me about how laser focused Josh Allen is. And he's that kind of kid. I've been around him. So I don't think there'll be, we can sit here and talk about numbers and you never know numbers, but I don't think their offensive philosophy or approach will change.
Well, to that point, Adam, they did go right ahead. We figured they would lose John Brown. A lot of people thought, let's just move Gabriel Davis up. But no, they're like, no, we're also going to bring in Emmanuel Sanders. And we'll still 3-4 wide receivers left and right.
Yeah, and Sanders will start opposite Diggs. They're going to give Davis another year to get acclimated. They like Davis a lot. They haven't lost any belief in him. He's going to be their top backup on the outside. It's just that they believe they're going to be on a Super Bowl run, and they'd rather go with a veteran right now opposite Diggs. So they're loaded, man. I know John and I were debating on our show today whether Allen could do as well as last year. Well, the good thing is, from a positive standpoint, everybody's back. Coaching staff, Brian Dable, surprisingly, did not become a head coach. Ken Dorsey's still there. McDermott believes in the pass game. Remember, he got trained in Philly. He understands analytically that you come out throwing. That's not going to change. I would agree with Greg there. The only thing is now, and no one could really answer this fully, but I do wonder now how teams will defend them. Now that they've seen the best of Josh Allen, what do they do to try to slow him down? Because last year, quite frankly, there were some times where he was unstoppable. So I do wonder if that will happen, if teams will play him a little differently.
I don't think he'll replicate last year, but it's one of those deals where no, he is not getting another 37 touchdowns. He's only going to get 35. You know, I mean, it's going to drop a little bit. Let's go to the fantasy guys here. Graham and Joe. Graham, I'll start with you. There is this little pocket on the board where you're around 100 overall, and you do have a couple of backs of note here available, and Moss is one of them. I kind of like Moss as an RB3 pick right around that spot here, 9th round, something like that. I feel like he should grab control of the backfield, not a zero in the passing game. Do you? And I haven't talked to you guys about Moss. Are you interested at all? I'll start with you, Graham, in Moss in 9th round, say.
Yeah, I think if you're going to draft a Bills back, you want it to be Moss. He can play on passing downs. He can pass protect better than Singletary. But the biggest thing holding both of these guys back is Josh Allen is their goal line back. Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen led this team and carries inside the 10-yard line last year. Moss actually was right behind him. Singletary, even though he had those 3 or 4 starts, he was still like a distant third to both of those guys. So, yeah, I think Moss has more touchdown upside. I think he has slightly better receiving upside. But at the end of the day, I mean, both these backs average like 8 fantasy points per game when both were healthy. And if both are going to be healthy, they're for sure going to be eating into each other.
Joe, buying opportunity this year on Zach Moss, a little bit of a post-type sleeper. Yeah.
He's the one I want more. And I don't think there's any doubt about that. But John, I got to say, just for from a fantasy perspective, if you're doing best ball drafts, Devin Singletary is literally free. I mean, he is 13th, 14th round. Remember, this is a guy who I didn't have any of them last year, but he was like a 4th and 5th round pick last year. He is free right now. And in the event that Moss doesn't step up, maybe they decide they're not going to give Allen as much opportunity at the goal line, whatever. We know Singletary has created some explosive plays in the past. You could do a lot worse as like an RB4 or RB5 in best ball than Devin Singletary right now. I mean, I don't like it. I'm not excited about making the pick, but sometimes you just got to make a pick where you say, this is going to be a player on a good team who you don't have to invest anything in. He actually caught 38 passes last year, which is more than I thought, and he did that in a split backfield. I'll have him on a number of rosters this year simply because he is so freaking cheap.
Hey,
Adam, back to Greg. You had a thought?
No, I just want to ask Adam a question because he follows this more than I do. I believe I just read this morning that they restructured Diggs.
I have not seen that yet, but
I read that this morning.
Okay.
Do you think that they're interested in Zach Ertz?
I would say yes. Earlier in the offseason they were. I have not heard lately.
Okay.
Because
I just read this morning about Diggs. I don't know if anybody else read it.
Right. So the question now for them is tight end. They added Jacob Hollister. It's been some sort of an underachiever, pretty athletic, but had a big injury history. Knox has not quite got to where they want him, but they do like him. Ertz certainly would help them. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know that they're willing to give up what it would take. The Eagles are not going to give him away. I've said that for a couple months now. They want a little bit more than teams are willing to give up in terms of draft compensation for now and for next year. So we'll see. It is, yeah. I find it interesting that they would restructure Diggs. In fact, Diggs is, if you really look at his contract, is certainly worth extending. I'd like to see how they restructured it.
Adam, real quick, Dawson Knox, guy that we've both kind of been enamored with a little bit. Very athletic kid, great kid, as we know. Did come on down the stretch. I just don't see, though, much room for growth with 3-4 wide receivers on the field. But that's another guy who he's probably still ascending. I think that's fair to say.
Well,
right?
The good thing is he's not going to get doubled. He's going to get open. He's had trouble staying on the field with health. But the guy's a pretty good athlete. I know they see him as a vertical threat, and he was also on the COVID list last season, in addition to the injuries the previous season. So he's had a little bit of bad luck. It's only been 2 years, but he's got to be more consistent. They're looking for him to be more of a factor. I know that they'd like to be more of a factor, but you're right. They have a lot of pass targets. It's not like he's going to get 60 to 70 catches, but I certainly could see 40 to 50 if he's healthy.
Do they keep Matt Breida as the third back real quick, bouncing around a little bit, Adam?
What do you
mean?
Don't have
much else.
Well, no, that's why they didn't sign him to cut him. Yeah. I mean,
right.
They brought him in as a change up. And now contract structure wise, The good thing for them is if he looks bad in training camp, yeah, they could cut him and owe him nothing. They only owe him 100, about 100 grand, 140, yeah, 140,000 is all that he got guaranteed. So yeah, on your question, could they walk away? Yeah, but they liked it because he's a veteran and he's got better quickness than the other guys. They liked him to be on the roster.
He
That
could
is-
be there. He could be their 10 personnel back, John, because when
Yeah.
the field spread
Spread
and he
him
hits a
out.
crease, that kid can run. So he could easily be a 10 personnel back.
Defensively, Greg, for those wondering, Tre'Davious White, if you're going to look at the schedule and say, oh, no, I can't draft, Corey Davis or something like that. Is that something that, concerns you at all? Or actually your thoughts on it? Did they travel Tre'Davious White as much this past year?
They did not, if I remember correctly. He played, I'm trying to think which side he played, but he did not travel a lot. They stayed with him on one side. So they can do that. And my guess is, depending on the opponent, it could happen, but I don't think that's built into what they do.
Seems like my camera just went out there, but it's all fine. We can keep going. You don't need me. You don't need to see me, and I will figure it out. But we'll move on to Miami and the Dolphins. And Greg, Tua Tagovailoa, I'm not really that optimistic based on him and his tape from his rookie season, but I am very optimistic with how they've put the team together
Right.
around him. I felt like he was somewhat limited, and he even said it this week that what they were running was very basic, and it was a pandemic and all that. I guess the question is, based on what you did see from him, the tape that he did put out there, how much of a leap do you think he can make in year 2 with a normal offseason with this impressive group of weapons?
I mean, he certainly can make a leap. He's not going to change the style of player that he is. He's a rhythm player. And that's what Chan Gailey tried to do a year ago, and they had moderate success. And then there were times they didn't. But he's a rhythm player. Now they've added the vertical game, and he can throw a good deep ball within the rhythm of the offense. They've got 2 real significant vertical dimensions now in Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle. So that will definitely be a part of their offense. But what Tua is as a player, that's not going to change. So he needs to play within structure. He's very quick on his drop and set. He hits that back foot, the ball comes out. He's not overly athletic, so he's not a pure second reaction player. He has to function effectively within the structure of the offense. And that makes the offensive line an important factor in what they get done.
Well, let's look at the backfield here, Adam. And, well, it looks like it's going to be a little bit of a piecemeal deal. I'm a little surprised they didn't go after a better option, a bigger name, a more proven player, but Myles Gaskin was very good. You do have Malcolm Brown, bigger back and all that. This kid Dokes is somewhat intriguing. Might this be a backfield where someone kind of comes out of nowhere like Myles Gaskin did last year?
Or Ahmed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, look, Dokes is a big back, real good size. If he makes a team, he'll have a chance to get on the field. Because as you and I have talked about probably since mid last season, Gaskin's really turned out to be a nice surprise. But you do wonder how much volume he could handle. And now that Irk Studesville is a co-coordinator, he really designs the run game. He may have a bigger hand in kind of the how they approach their offense. That's another thing. I know they're loaded at receiver. There's no question. They're super deep now with Fuller and Waddle. And Bowden now is Lynn Bowden now is there for a full season. They're loaded now at the receiver spot. So I do wonder now, will they open it up a little more? We just, and because we don't have Chan Gailey anymore, so there's a lot we don't know in terms of philosophy.
No doubt. Fantasy guys, Mike Gesicki. Wow. Very much a tease. He flashes. I think he might be a guy that Tua leans on a little bit. Big dude, middle of the field, acrobatic catches, just inconsistent. But with Parker, Fuller, Waddle, there could be some great opportunities for Gesicki. Graham, I know you've been a little bit of a hater. I made a decision last year not to push him, and I really don't regret that. Although there were some times where I was like, wow, this guy is balling out. Do you feel any better this year about Gesicki?
I want real quick. I want to wrap back about Tua because, like, he came off one of the most devastating injuries you can have as a quarterback, and he played 9 games last year. I think I think we're kind of writing off Tua a little too early, and with all of these pieces, Gesicki included, I'm pretty excited about this offense. I still think they're going to be pretty run heavy. But yeah, Gesicki's always been a tough one for me because he's always been so boom or bust, and his targets just spike week to week. I mean, he'll have a game where he has 8 targets, 9 targets, and then he'll have a stretch where he has 2 to 3. I think that's going to continue. Now you add Waddle, you add Fuller. There's 4 legit weapons that the Dolphins can use, and Gesicki's a big slot receiver, so I'm wondering how they're going to change his usage now that they have Fuller who can play out of the slot. Waddle's going to line up everywhere. Parker should strictly be on the outside, but I mean, they have 3 guys that can line up in the same spot. So yeah, I've been off Gesicki for all these years and it's worked out pretty well. And I don't really see a reason to go back in with, like Irv Smith going off the same range, Tyler Higbee. Both of those guys I think have more upside to lead their, not necessarily lead their teams in targets, but just see a higher share of the targets on their team.
Keep in mind they drafted Hunter Long in the 3rd round too.
Yeah.
And that leads me to a question. And I want to do like, I don't know if this is a question we can answer, but Greg and Adam, and anybody can chime in. Graham and I have had this discussion. It is my belief, Adam, and again, no way for me to prove this. I don't have any inside information, but it is my belief that the Miami Dolphins traded up to number 6 with the expectation that Jamar Chase or Kyle Pitts was going to be there. I have a hard time believing, and I want to talk about Waddle and his skill set, but I have a hard time believing they made that trade, giving up a future 1st-round pick to go get Jalen Waddle. What are your thoughts?
I don't agree with that at all, Joe.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, there are some teams had not only did some teams have Jalen Waddle as the top receiver for this draft, I know teams had him as a top 5 player based on their grading system. So I just think they went up and said, okay, here's the guy that we know could be an absolute star. They invested a big pick last year on Tua. So no, I just think that they were going to get a top player, and this is the way their board. I mean, this is the kind of the way that their board was looked upon. Jalen Waddle, Greg knows this. I mean, this guy's one of the best receivers that come out of the draft in a long time based on skill set. Yeah.
Jalen Waddle.
How are they going to use Jalen Waddle, Greg, initially? And is that any different than what you eventually see him being maybe by the end of the year? How quickly I'm sure he's going to be on the field right away, but how quickly can he make a big impact in your opinion?
Well, I don't know what their plan is, but my plan would be that he's a movement player. You can line him up in multiple spots. You can use him on jet sweeps. You can use him on orbit reverses. You can use him in the wide receiver screen game. He's a vertical dimension. They've got 2 serious vertical dimensions now in Fuller and Jalen Waddle. I mean, you're talking about serious vertical dimension.
Yeah.
And Tua doesn't have a big arm, but he's a very good rhythmic deep ball thrower. So that's going to be a meaningful part of their offense.
Guys, they also have Lynn Bowden here. So if they have designs on using him,
he's another guy that can line up in multiple spots. He's certainly not as refined a receiver as Fuller or Waddle, but you can line him up in multiple spots and you can design, the term now that everybody uses, and you can do it with Bowden, is manufactured touches.
Now, Greg, one of the things that fantasy people are going to have trouble with, and you look at these situations and you look at the school and you look how guys produced. You liked Henry Ruggs a lot coming out last year too. He did not produce at all for fantasy purposes. That it has that and the opportunity have people ranking Waddle pretty significantly behind Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith, strictly in terms of opportunity. How did you compare and contrast Jalen Waddle to Henry Ruggs, seeing them in the same offense?
That's a great question. I mean, I think the difference in 40 times is meaningless. They're both explosive vertically. That's what they are. I would say that Waddle can do more with the ball in his hands. Waddle, to me, I don't remember recently seeing a guy that could move so effortlessly and fluidly at such velocity. Like his body control and movements at the speed with which he moved with the ball in his hands was absolutely remarkable. So I think he gives you a little more in what you can do with him. But you're also dealing, and again, it's rookie receivers. We're in an age where a Ruggs, oh, he's a bust. Well, we don't. That's a silly thing to say. So Waddle is on a team where there's a lot of weapons. Joe, I would say that he's probably not going to be a high volume receiver this year. Now, I could be dead wrong, but they've got a lot of players. I don't think he's getting 130 targets.
Yeah. And that's the thing for fantasy. It's just like, if you're drafting Jalen Waddle in the 9th round, of course, there's always going to be somebody who's going to yell at us, say, you have Jalen Waddle ranked way too high, but look what happened with Henry Ruggs. So I'm trying to compare and contrast.
Oh, no, but just so you know, Joe, the league thinks, I could just tell you from talking to so many receiver coaches, it's not close. Waddle just coming out. We're not based on what Ruggs did last year. We're just talking about for the draft last year. Waddle is a much better prospect than Ruggs. Not even close.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Greg, we think that Tua is potentially, a ball distributor.
That's what he is.
Not a cannon. And he's got plenty of options here to distribute it. But based on what you saw from him in year one, and again, maybe we're grading him unfairly coming off that injury, it does seem like he's probably going to need some time. And granted, I like Tua for fantasy where he's being drafted, but that doesn't mean I'm expecting this big blow up season.
I think if Tua stays healthy, he'll put up good numbers. Again, this is separate. This is fantasy. This is separate. There was a GM out at this event that I was just at, and we had some great talks. And, Tua is not viewed as a super high level talent pretty much by anybody. That's not the point. The point is he's a distributor. He's an efficient executor of an offense. They've got a lot of weapons. I think this is going to be a tough deal. I don't, for Graham and Joe here, if they're talking about, and then for you, John, about targets, I don't think we know that. But he's a distributor. That's the way this offense will be. And he's a distributor who can throw a good deep ball. So there's a lot of players here. But I don't envy you trying to figure out who's going to get the targets here.
Yeah, well, Will Fuller is not someone I'm high on. You mentioned he's a tremendous vertical receiver, not just a vertical receiver, but he's new to the team. Parker, I'm fine with. I mean, I kind of like
because they have a different offensive coordinator, John. So they're all new.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. But I like the weapons for Tua, but no one really truly stands out. No one, and I mean no one.
Well, you're talking about fantasy, right? Yeah. Right. I mean, Devontae Parker clearly at his very best, and he's had stretches where he's been at his best. He's a really good boundary X. He's had stretches where you'd look at Parker and go, wow, that guy should catch 85 balls for 1,200 yards. He's had those stretches. Now, is that going to happen in the context of this offense? My guess is no, but he's capable of that.
Right. I got to say, I think Devontae Parker's the best bet based on price, based on what we'll probably see target share wise. I think there's a good bet that he leads the team in targets and he's being drafted as the third guy out of all these.
Oh, I agree.
Super cheap, John.
I don't know how many catches you'll have, but I would bet the house Parker leads them in targets.
Yeah. I mean, Fuller is such a bad bet right now. I mean, he's going in the 7th round, and that's where he was going with Deshaun Watson as the quarterback, and we just don't know what Tua will be as a deep thrower.
Well, I'll give you the numbers here, Greg, in case you're interested on kind of what I'm expecting from Tua, if I could call it up here. Tua Tagovailoa this year. Man, my document is not operating. 24 touchdown passes. He did run for 3 last year. So maybe he surprises with 3-4 touchdowns on the ground. Again, he already had the 3. 24 touchdown passes and 3,700 yards passing. Does that, in your mind, 9 picks? Does that in your mind qualify as numbers? I mean, that's not bad.
Yeah, no. And he might even throw more touchdowns depending on the structure of their offense. I mean, Adam said they want to run the ball. We'll see how that plays out. The clear best skill players on this offense are receivers. So we'll see how it plays out.
That's a great point. And it goes back to the backfield again. Graham, Joe, are you guys have any interest in Myles Gaskin at his ADP? I do not.
Yeah, John, he's in that Mike Davis range where, like, if you need a running back, they're kind of these nice fallback options where you're like, all right, I I couldn't pass on these receivers. And as a matter of fact, John, I just read your draft plan, and you are in on running backs early, so we're going to be getting that up. There's a tease for you. But if you're one of those guys who loads up on receivers early and you're like, I cannot pass up these values at receivers, and Myles Gaskin and Mike Davis are going in that same range as like Javonte Williams and ETN rookies who you don't really know what's going to happen in terms of their roles. He's kind of one of those safer fallback options. I'm personally more interested in Davis. I don't know how Graham feels, but they are the unsexy options there. I wonder if at some point I'd just rather draft Javonte Williams and ETN just based on what they might be, as opposed to knowing what Gaskin and
Sure.
and
Yeah.
Davis are. And the thing is, John, they showed you last year with Gaskin, with Ahmed, they drafted this Garrett Dokes, who's a really good athlete, in the 7th round.
Yeah.
Who's to say they just don't pull someone out of their ass and he becomes their lead back?
Absolutely. That's why I brought up Dokes earlier. I think they'll just kind of see what they see. You can't look at Myles Gaskin as their primary back for the whole season. I'm not seeing that. Greg, defensively, I absolutely love that. I actually did our defensive team projections for fantasy, and I had to up their sack totals, obviously, with the kid out of Miami being drafted. But I love their D this year. I have them with over 50 sacks. They get interceptions, a good secondary. I think they're still ascending. They've gave a couple teams some real problems. The Chiefs last year at times. That game against the Rams was an embarrassment. What do you think of this Dolphin defense right now?
Well, they were highly schemed defense a year ago, and they did a really good job. You mentioned that Rams game. That was a ton of zero coverage. That was specific to the Rams because of Goff, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But no, this is a very intriguing offense. I'm very curious to see, what they do with Jalen Phillips. I mean, is this a true 3-4 as a foundation? We'll see. Phillips might only be a sub package player to start, which means you'll still get a lot of snaps. But no, you're right. They've got good players. They drafted Phillips in the 1st round, Javon Holland from Oregon in the 2nd round. I thought he was a really good prospect. I think he could step in and be a starter at safety as a rookie. They've got good corners. I've always liked Justin Coleman as a slot corner. So it's a pretty intriguing defense.
Yeah. What about Christian Wilkins right now? What has he shown you thus far?
Yeah, I haven't
Anything?
studied him, personally.
Right.
So I can't really speak to that. I always liked Raekwon Davis. I loved him when he came out of Alabama. He's to me, a really strong interior defender who's got some pass rush traits that need to be further refined and developed. But I always thought he was a good prospect.
And back to a name Joe mentioned, Hunter Long. What do you think? What is Hunter Long here?
He's
an
a tight
eventual
end.
replacement for Gesicki, it looks like.
You mean you think they'll let Gesicki go? They won't re-sign him?
I kind of feel that way. Yeah.
Well, I thought Hunter Long was a really good prospect. I thought he was very similar to Pat Freiermuth, maybe just a notch below, but kind of a complete tight end. And again, I thought that he was the kind of player whose fantasy value simply becomes a function of targets. If he was on a team where they threw him the ball a lot, he'd catch a lot of balls. It all depends on what his target, his volume of targets is. But I think he's a pretty complete tight end. He's pretty athletic. We saw that at his pro day. I thought that was a really good pick for them.
Yeah. And Adam, it's the final year of Gesicki's rookie deal, right?
Yes, he was drafted in 18, correct.
Yeah. They sneakily have a very deep receiving core of like veterans. I don't know if these guys are going to make it, but Jakeem Grant, Alan Hearns, Albert Wilson.
Yeah. How about that? I mean, someone's got to go. But actually, more than a couple guys.
Mac Hollins.
Mac's there. He's there. He doesn't play receiver. He'll play in spot. He only played receiver last year because they were down in. They had some guys out, but he's a special teams player only.
Right. Preston Williams. I mean, they have very good depth here.
Hey,
and pretty good O-line too, obviously.
Hey, Adam, real quick. So with their backs, who's going to play special teams? Because it won't be Gaskin and Ahmed. Yeah, Ahmed didn't play special teams last year.
I don't even look at that. Yeah.
Patrick Laird. Patrick Underground Laird.
No, I'm just asking because, I mean, they're not going to carry 5. So that would mean that either Brown or Dokes is going to get cut if Laird's going to play special teams.
No, Gaskin, Brown are definitely going to be on the team. After that, it could be anybody. I mean, typically, teams keep 4 backs.
Yeah.
And you're right. One of them may have to play the special teams, obviously Laird, but
yeah,
I wouldn't count Laird. A lot of teams, like, depending on who it is, they don't count does the guy technically play a running back? Yeah, but they don't use him.
Right.
Like Matthew Slater for the Patriots. He's technically a receiver. They don't use him as a receiver. He's a special teams player only. Before we go on to the next team, just to finish this off, there's absolutely no question. There's an opportunity here for someone to come out of nowhere, whether it's Dokes or Ahmed, whoever it is.
Yeah.
Someone to push for a role. I would agree with that.
And Dokes is a bigger guy, right?
Yeah. So you see, I talked to a scout who had his area. He definitely should have been drafted. He's got ability.
Passes the eyeball test fairly well.
Real good size. Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on here, New England. And Greg, in your mind, you've been doing this a long time. Everything you saw from Cam Newton last year, better off season, more comfortable, I'm sure, in the offense. But I mean, how much better do you think he can get? Do you think he can stave off a Mac Jones for all year? And if they do need to go to Mac Jones, let's say it's Cam to open the season and they go to Mac Jones, how much of the offense needs to change? Adam and I talked with the Scott Zolak on Friday. He felt that they'd have to change the offense quite a bit going from Cam to Mac Jones. Others I've talked to, like Mike Reese and a couple of other people, don't really feel like it's that much of a change going from Cam to Mac Jones. But starting with Cam, how much better at this point in his career do you believe he can be in year 2 with this team and offense?
Well, it's a really interesting question about the nature of the offense because their skill sets are so different, different.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, every offensive coach has a playbook that fits everything. That's what playbooks are. They take care of everything. It's just a matter of what portion of the playbook you use that fits the quarterback that you have. So it's not as if they have to go buy another playbook. But they're totally different players. I would expect Newton to be much better this year. And by the way, say what you want about Cam Newton, but he's a very proud man. And they drafted a quarterback in the first round. And I guarantee he's not real thrilled with that. And obviously last year, he knows that he got ripped a lot. It was not a good season. It was not a good way for him to start the season with COVID and what happened. It's a different off season. I would expect Cam Newton to play pretty well this year. Now, we know based on their personnel that they're going to be a significant 2 tight end offense because they just don't have a whole lot at the receiver position. So, and they did spend a lot of money, a lot of capital on Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. So, and the year before they drafted 2 tight ends in the 3rd round. So they'll probably be somewhat tight end heavy.
Great O-line, top 5 O-line this year when you get everyone back here. A lot of people held out last year on the defensive side of the ball as well. So it would be a very good environment. Still going to be a run heavy offense here. And Adam, these guys, the Patriots, they should, I think, be in on Julio Jones. They are really in need of an outside receiver.
They are, but I think Greg nailed it. This is going to be a heavy 12 personnel team. I don't see them being a high volume pass team unless they're behind. And I think you and I had talked, John, off the air. We think the defense is going to be improved by the personnel that they have. So I think it's more of a controlled offense.
I agree.
I just don't see them being pass happy. Now, yeah, you're right. Theoretically, John, their receiver core is not very good. We know that. But to invest $15 million this season in Julio Jones, whether you're not going to be a high volume pass team, I'd
potentially have to give up a number 1 or number 2 to do that.
Right.
It's a lot.
Wouldn't roll it out, but on the surface, do they need to improve there? Yes.
Yeah.
But because they've vested, no team is spending more cap space and cash at tight end, and it's not close at the tight end position right now.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, with Cam, they're going to have a significant run game here. I mean, they've got Harris,
I know.
They've got Michelle. They drafted Ramondre Stevenson in the 4th round, who's a very intriguing back. So they've got backs, and then you add in Newton with the quarterback run game. This is almost going to be, in my view anyway, an old school team. This is almost going to be like the Patriots were before Brady quite became Brady, where they ran the ball, they played great defense. I think you're going to see them be kind of that team, John.
Yeah, very fair. All very fair. Great O-line, good running game and all that. And it's either Cam or a rookie quarterback. I still would say that they haven't done enough at wide receiver, other than Nelson Aguilar. We know about the tight ends and all that. I tell you what, though, if they did get Julio, I feel like they'd be one of the three best teams in the AFC. I feel like they'd be right back in that Super Bowl mix here. So, Adam, if they don't get Julio, or do you have any interest in Aguilar? Where's he going to line up? I would imagine he'll be all over the place.
It's going to be, this offense is going to be dominated by the tight ends because they both could. Do not underestimate Jonnu Smith. I talked to a lot of teams in free agency. They just thought he was out of their price range, but they think he has a chance to be really good. I know Hunter Henry's got to play to justify his contract. We know he's an athlete. It's going to be dominated. The target's going to be dominated by those tight ends. Now, they might split them down the middle. We don't know yet. We're way too early with this. Aguilar will get his share of targets too, because you can move him around. He can play a variety of positions at receiver. Kendrick Bourne is kind of limited. He's okay, decent player. But the thing is, though, John, if you look at their available pass targets now that Julian Edelman's gone, it's the two receivers and two tight ends. Who else is going to get the football?
Right. Aguilar will be your shot play guy, I would imagine, your vertical threat, Greg. I talked to one beat writer when the signing was made in March saying, well, now we have a quarterback who can't throw and a wide receiver who can't catch. Talking about.
Well, I thought Aguilar was better last year.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think he's a certain kind of player. You know, he's kind of a vertical guy, and I think he was effective with the Raiders doing that. I think that's kind of what he is. I mean, you know, he's not. I don't view him as a volume target. We'll see. I mean, look. Right now, if you look at their receiving core, I mean, if they're going to line up with two receivers, who are the starting two receivers? Would we say it's Aguilar and Jacoby Myers?
Either that or Aguilar and Bourne.
I mean,
I think it's going to be Myers because Myers played outside last year too.
Yeah.
He's not strictly just a slot guy.
Oh, by the way, I could tell you there are teams that think Nelson Aguilar, when he's lined up in the slot, could outrun anybody. The teams grading him for free agency is to be able to play a lot inside. Because he's done it before, particularly with the Eagles in 17.
Yep.
So if Cam Newton could get his accuracy back, and I know that's a big challenge, but we'll see. Aguilar could be a little sneaky for fantasy.
Hey, John, I have a weird feeling about Jonnu Smith here. We've seen how Belichick has talked about him in the past. He called him the best tight end run after the catch in the NFL. You saw what they paid him. They paid him more than Hunter Henry. And when you look at his production, people are, he's never produced. That is meaningless to me. Jonnu Smith ran a route, I believe, on just like 50% of the Titans' passing plays last year. He was into blocks so much. You know, remember they lost Taylor Lewan.
Yeah, crushed him.
So, like, that's meaningless to me. I just have a weird feeling here that this is an example of Belichick going out and getting a player he really likes and really wanted. I don't know how you feel. The Hunter Henry thing complicates matters to me.
Yeah, it does.
Fantasy, I would not be stunned if Jonnu Smith leads this team in targets.
Yeah, and he's very, very gifted athletically. I mean, he did, again, no knock on Tennessee. They've obviously done well. But I thought that Jonnu Smith, just in terms of how he could be deployed, is one of those guys you could line up all over. You could split him out. He could be a boundary X. He wasn't really used that way much at all in Tennessee. I mean, you can make the argument that in terms of just athletic skill set, he's a top 5 tight end in the league.
Right. Didn't Tennessee on occasion would literally hand him the football and run?
They did. They actually did him on a toss sweep 2 years ago. We ran 57 yards.
Yeah.
So, no, he's a very, very athletic guy. I mean, I think your point, Joe, is a very, very good one.
I think a part of the reason, too, that Smith didn't really pop with the Titans is Anthony Firkser is a slot receiver. They line him up in the slot 70% of the time, so Smith has to play on the line. He had to play on the line to scrimmage.
Oh, he's going to be he was more of a Y. Talking to the Titans about him, one of the many reasons why they couldn't even justify paying him half of his contract that he got, $12.5 million a year with the Patriots. The pass game goes through A.J. Brown in Tennessee. Now, of course, we'll see if they trade for Julio Jones. Jonnu Smith will never be a high volume guy with Titans. And yes, he's a great athlete. And he also has a chance to be a 3-down tight end for them. He might play he will definitely play more than the other kid, Henry.
Yeah, we've got Jonnu. I do at 13, 56 grabs would be higher if it were not for Henry. But Greg, I agree with everything you
Better
said there.
blocker, too.
But Hunter Henry is not going to be like the next Daniel Graham. He's probably going to have 3 games a year where he's kind of the guy. I could see that.
Oh no, he'll catch balls, but
Yeah.
Smith, Smith can do more.
Right. Real quick, Adam, in the backfield, we talked to Scott Zolak. We've talked to a bunch of Patriot people. He thinks Sonny Michel is going to make that team, and he did look pretty good down the stretch. That'd be a little bit of a quagmire now if it's Michel and Harris and Stevenson, little James White, and of course Brandon Bolden's got to make the roster because he's been on the team since the 70s. Sonny Michel, is it going to be in or out at the end of the year? And do you have any interest in any of these backs? I'm kind of out on all of them.
Yeah, I mean, White has his role. That's not going to change as long as Joshua Daniels is there, which he is. He's going to have his pass down role. Harris and Michel will vie for the first and second down back role. We don't know about Stevenson yet. We'll learn more. Bolden doesn't really factor in. He's just a special teams player. He'll get his whatever he gets carries per year, but he doesn't really factor in. It's those 4 backs. We'll see how it works out. I find it funny that and then that kid JJ Taylor's there who made it.
Yeah, he's been
year,
there for a number of years.
Yeah, well, no, JJ Taylor.
Year.
No, JJ Taylor was a rookie, that undrafted kid last year, wasn't he?
He was on there last year, at least.
Yeah,
Taylor.
just last year. But
yeah,
I would avoid them all because they haven't been willing to commit to anyone. And then what we know is even when it looks like Michel's on the precipice of being that guy, he gets hurt or he just disappoints.
Joe, I kind of liked him last summer. Jamian Harris, he was one of my guys to target, but he wasn't bad. But I mean, it's just one of those things where it's just not happening. Cam's vulturing the touchdowns. You don't get any checkdowns from him. So it feels like every week he ran like 17 times for 76 yards, looked solid, but didn't really make much of an impact. Do you like Harris this year at all? At least he's cheap.
It's funny, John, because what you expect the offense, I think it's going to be a run heavy offense as is, but if you expect the offense to be more run heavy if Cam Newton's the quarterback. The irony is I feel better about Damian Harris for fantasy if Mac Jones is the quarterback because Damian Harris is going to get goal line opportunities if Mac Jones is the quarterback. So there's that little example of how things would be different. And I think Harris's price right now is fair based on, first and foremost, like, again, this is a guy who looked good last year, and there is a chance Cam Newton isn't the quarterback. And I like his talent. It's just, is he going to get those touchdown opportunities? Maybe some check down opportunities. Those will happen if Mac Jones is the quarterback. And Mac Jones was a first round pick. I mean, he was the 15th pick. So you're not talking about like we talk about the 49ers with Trey Lance, trading all that to go up and get him. But I expect I'm going to see Mac Jones at some point this year.
Yeah, let's go back to Greg on that real quick. We're going to move on in a moment. But Greg, it does make sense with Mac Jones having great accuracy and, really deals with the football well. And if Cam is throwing inaccurate balls and guys are open.
John, these are the kinds of conversations I never know what to do with because all we're doing is speculating. We don't have any idea what's going to happen with Mac Jones. I mean, for fantasy, what are you saying here? Who's the quarterback?
Well, I'm saying that Cam Newton has always had ball location issues. Cam Newton looked terrible last year. He's getting up there in age and all that.
Okay, so who's the quarterback week 1, John?
That's to be determined. But my point is, if Cam is not great, and Mac Jones is a number 1 pick, these guys play. This would be, in my opinion, a very good environment for Mac Jones. Stay ahead of the down, good defense, run-based offense, play action off that, couple of tight ends. Overall, I think if Mac Jones is pressed into duty, if he plays, he's going to be, in the coach's mind, a better option than Cam. And we'll see if we get there.
If he plays, he'd only play if they thought he was a better option than Cam.
Right, exactly. So what do you think of the situation for a guy like Mac Jones? I think it's pretty good if he does play.
It probably would be pretty good if he does play. I mean, again, it comes down to fantasy. I mean, I don't know.
We don't know.
I mean, I think Mac Jones is in a good situation, but I don't think he's going into the season as the starting quarterback.
Right. Yeah, we don't know. Graham, you could argue right now that Cam Newton is the best value at quarterback. I mean, if he holds the job, he's going to be probably.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the Lance conversation we had last week. I just don't think Cam's going to start all year. And even if he does, I mean, for our game, he is strictly a runner, and he's coming off a couple years with a shoulder injury, and sure, you mentioned the ball location issues. He's always struggled with that. But for our game, man, I mean, over 50% of Cam's fantasy points last year came from running, and you got to keep in mind that's like extremely high. Lamar Jackson was at like 40%. Kyler was around 40%. If they do run the ball a little bit more with Dame and these other two backs, like Cam is I just don't really see the ceiling like we used to with him.
Yeah, I mean, they do add the two tight ends and Aguilar.
Yeah.
I mean, the receiving core was pretty damn bad.
They're going to run the hell out of the ball. That's what they're going to do.
Joe and Graham, before we move on, I like the D for fantasy because, they were great in 2019 and fell off big time. I kind of like them. They're going to get a bunch of dudes back. I've got them at 7. Joe, I think they're a nice value, don't you think?
Yeah, they're fine. I mean, Belichick, you always expect he'll scheme some stuff up. Matty Patty's back there, so we'll see what kind of influence he has now. John, I think that's a good value and certainly one that you don't have to take before the last round or two of your draft, and that's what we're always looking for.
Let's move on to the Jets here. You are listening to the fantasypoints.com virtual powwow part 3. We're covering the AFC East and the AFC North here today on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, June 2nd, we'll be back to wrap it up here. Gangrene here, Robert Saleh, Mike LaFleur taking over here for the Jets. And Greg, again, say what you want about Zach Wilson. We'll see. But everything lines up very well, in my opinion. He was a real nice ball distributor last year and, I guess throughout his career. And they've given him targets. Corey Davis, Mims. I don't know if Crowder is going to make it. I don't think so. Elijah Moore.
By the way, I don't agree with that because they're in good cap position. Wouldn't you want to help a rookie quarterback by having a pretty good slot receiver?
Yeah, but maybe they think they got one in Elijah Moore, and they do have Braxton Berrios who did some things. Isn't it like they could save a decent amount of money though for this year if
they can, but they're not in a position where they need to. Like with Buffalo, they had less than $4 million in cap space, so they can't even sign all the rookies right now if they didn't restructure Diggs' contract.
Yeah.
Whereas the Jets are fine. They have $27 million in cap space. They don't need to get Crowder's cap space.
Okay. Well, Greg, we'll see about LaFleur and all that, but just generally on paper here, it's very dissimilar to Sam Darnold for one. I mean,
Well, I like the fit because I thought when I did Zach Wilson, I thought he'd be really effective in a Shanahan McVay style offense. And with Mike LaFleur there, it's basically that. So I think this is a really good situation for him tactically, conceptually, thematically. He's got a really live arm. He moves extremely well. I think they've upgraded their O-line. Becton played well as a rookie last year at left tackle. They've moved. Vera Tucker will be their left guard. I think he's a really good player who can be a quality starter from day one. Van Roten's been a solid guard in this league. He came from Carolina. The big question is right tackle. They drafted the kid from USC a couple of years ago in the 3rd round, Edoga. He hasn't quite panned out. I mean, George Fant is still there. Everybody always talks about how athletic he is, but he's never really become that good a player. So we'll see. But I think it's a better O-line. It's an improving O-line. And then you deal on the outside, John. You deal with the fact that Denzel Mims, who we liked on tape, he's going into his 2nd year. He's a true X. Corey Davis was a Z in Tennessee. That's what he'll be here. Elijah Moore was one of my favorite wideouts to watch. I liked his tape more than Kadarius Toney. I think Moore is a really good prospect. So there's weapons here, and to me it's a good system for Wilson. And some questions at the weapons position, but if it all works out, the weapons are pretty good.
Are you a little surprised because LaFleur in his history is generally run the ball? Are you a little surprised that they didn't invest more resources in the running back group? And Michael Carter's like that tweener type. Obviously nothing like a Derrick Henry.
But I think coming from San Francisco, he probably sees it as more system based than individual back based. So you look at Perrine, Coleman, Carter, who's a good player and a good prospect. I bet they look at it as if they've got backs, that they did not need one guy, that they have backs, and the system will allow for the success, just like the Niners.
I'm just not sure, Adam, if any of these guys complement one another all that well. I mean, P. Ryan is kind of like a middle of the road guy. Coleman, I don't even know.
Yeah,
if he'll make
I
the
get
team.
what you mean. Yeah, right now I don't. It doesn't sound like they have any immediate interest in adding a back. I just find it interesting that they would go with this group. We all like Michael Carter, but he's smaller. So you do wonder if Carter's the guy week one, how much volume could he handle at this level? Because they're going to run the ball. If it's a Shanahan offense, they run the ball. So that's obviously why Tevin Coleman's there, because he knows the offense. I just find it interesting that they did not sign a power back, a guy with size. Josh Adams is there, who does have size, but we'll see if he even makes the team. Coleman can't depend on. So it's kind of, you're right, John. It's kind of a mystery, this run game. My money would be on Carter because he's more gifted than these other backs, but we'll see. I know they're very happy with their offensive line. They do believe Connor McGovern can play better, their center, who they paid a lot of money to from Denver. Greg's right. Fant is the guy who needs to play better. They gave him a lot of money up front. He needs to play at a higher level.
Greg, Michael Carter, back to you. Do you think he could possibly basically be the guy, get 180 carries, 30 grabs, something like that, as their primary back?
Could be.
Working.
Could be. Absolutely. I thought he was somewhat similar to Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming out. I think he's a good runner, a very good receiver. But again, not that I'm disagreeing with what Adam said or what you guys are saying, but I don't think they view running back as a position of weakness. I think they feel they have a number of quality backs, and that's the background of Mike LaFleur.
Yeah, Ty Johnson is pretty good too. He's got some juice.
Yeah, John. He's not to say you should be drafting Ty Johnson in the 7th round, but his measurables are remarkably similar to those of Tevin Coleman. Now that doesn't mean that Greg and Adam can speak to this better in terms of his stylistic usage, but we know Tevin Coleman, I mean, he's being held together by bubble wrap right now. So, I mean, I think Ty Johnson is somebody who, if Michael Carter doesn't take this job or it's some sort of committee, he's not somebody to overlook because you said he has some juice, and I agree with that.
Greg, real quick, I kind of like Denzel Mims. I like what I saw from him last year. Obviously, it's not a huge body of work, but I kind of feel like already that we've seen Corey Davis. He's a little up and down, looks good some weeks not so good. I kind of feel like Denzel Mims might have already, I view him as having a more upside than Corey Davis. I think in 3-4 years, if things go well for Mims, he's going to be having a better career than Corey Davis currently is.
Well, I think sometimes with the receivers, targets, volume, it becomes a function of offense too. Has Corey Davis, quote unquote, lived up to being the 5th pick in the draft? No, not if you look at his numbers and his production, but he played in Tennessee, which was a clear run first offense. Now, I know the Jets want to run the ball, but I don't think they'll be as run heavy as Derrick Henry and the Titans. So we'll see. I mean, Mims will be the X, and I like Mims. I think he's got the qualities to be an X. He's big. He can run a bit. He can run in breaking routes. And Corey Davis is a Z. And it depends on how much they throw the ball and how much their offense ends up being structured, how it's put together. And much of that will depend on their defense because we'll see how much they have to throw the football.
Aren't they the same size, though? Davis and Mims? Corey Davis should be a good X. Don't you think?
I always thought he could be an X, but it didn't quite happen that way.
The Titans thought he was a little bit too finesse. Corey Davis, yeah, good year. Let's call it like it is.
Yeah.
They declined his 5th year option, and he knew it. He had to have a good year. He did a good job. He's a good player. Look, this guy's a high 1st round pick. There's some knocks on him. Look, he never became the player, John, that let's call it like it is. The Titans thought he would be with the Titans, but last year opened my eyes with him. He did a good job. He really came on.
Yeah, but I think what we're talking about is kind of to my point. Like
Bodies. They're both long. They both can run.
Yep.
Mims is probably better athlete. He's based on the coaches I spoke
I think
with,
he
he's
moves a
better
little bit
athlete.
better. Yeah.
Yeah. He's
Yeah.
Unfortunately he had strains on both of his hamstrings last year, so he never could become who they thought. Plus he had no off season.
Oh yeah, and most of his targets were like uncatchable. But it's going to be fascinating too if Chris Herndon, remember him? He actually showed some signs of life.
They have a
This
lot
is
of
it.
tight ends,
Last
by the way.
chance saloon.
They do.
Final year of his deal. Adam, if Chris Herndon can contribute, dare I say they're loaded at receiver.
I wouldn't go. No, the thing is, they have with total pass targets. If you add Keelan Cole in there, who's being paid a lot to be a backup.
Yeah.
Hernan, you mentioned Ryan Griffin, who's been there for a bit. Tyler Croft was a very highly paid tight end by the Bills. It never worked out. You're in terms of total pass targets, yes, but the problem is none of them plus Crowder, none of them are A-level. Now Elijah Moore has got a chance to be their best receiver. I not this year, but down the line, one of the favorite receivers for coaches I spoke with for the draft. I know Greg has also said he likes him a lot.
Yeah, we all love him.
I
Yeah.
love Elijah Moore. I love.
Can't wait to see
seeing the chemistry that he and Wilson develop over time.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Number one for me, like who is Wilson leaning on? Who is Wilson showing chemistry
well, you
with?
would think it would be Davis as the veteran or Mims, but that's a good question because if Crowder's on the roster again, there's no reason to think that he wouldn't. This guy's a damn good slot receiver who's a high volume slot receiver. So
what is Crowder's contract situation, Adam?
This is it. This is the last year of his deal, and he's making a lot of money, $10 million.
Because I can tell you right now, this is just my opinion. Okay, take it for what it's worth. I personally believe that if Moore does well through the offseason, given that Keelan Cole has also been a very efficient slot receiver in this league with Jacksonville, that Crowder could be a cap casualty.
Yeah, I agree. He'll be on New England.
Well, and it's funny. It wouldn't be a cap casualty because they don't need the cap space. But
you know what I mean. He could be. He just could
he could just cut him, and they don't owe him anything. Actually, the one thing I would say about his contract, there's no guaranteed money. They could just cut him and get the cap space back. Not that they need it, but he's got to earn it. I'll say that he's got to stay healthy in training camp. We know what he is when he's healthy. The guy is a volume target.
Well, they may need to have to sling it and throw it a little bit more than it like because this defense, Adam, is not good.
They're changing it over. Greg, are you a Carl Lawson guy? What do you think of him?
I like Carl Lawson. I think he's a good edge pass rusher, and they'll be a 4-3 now. And I think their front has a chance to be pretty good. With Lawson, Quinnen Williams actually had a good year last year. Sheldon Rankins is a good player. C.J. Mosley's still there. Hopefully he can have a healthy season. Jared Davis, who is very, very talented. I don't know what happened in Detroit, but he's got a lot of talent.
Scheme fit with Patricia is what I understand. He just
the question is their secondary. That's the issue, and that's a big issue. I'm not saying it's not an issue, but that's a big issue.
Yeah, corner's a big issue, John. Big issue. If you're throwing it, you're going after those corners.
Yep. Part 3 here of the 2021 fantasypoints.com virtual powwow going on right now. We are covering the AFC this week. We've just wrapped up the AFC East. We're going to move over to the AFC North. And if you're not a subscriber to the website, ton of content up already. Early bird miss 2-1, early bird miss 21, save 10% off your subscription. Let's go to Baltimore and let's take a look at the roster here and understand that, they're going to be a run-based team, but they are adding more pass targets here, Adam. But I will go to the backfield. I'll start with you, Adam. I think, and last year I was not real high on Dobbins at all, largely because of Gus Edwards. I thought, you know what? They love
Ingram
Gus
too.
Edwards.
You would. Yeah, Ingram was also last year.
Well, yeah. I think that was established that Ingram was in the mix. Of course, he ended up being phased out, but obviously Gus and JK, I don't think they'll hand it over like, oh, here you go, JK, you're going to get the ball 320 times, but it does kind of feel that they want Dobbins to step up.
He's the guy.
And kind of emerge a little bit more.
Dobbins is going to get 15 plus touches a game. If he does his job, does what he's supposed to do, it's a 2-man backfield. I don't know that Justice Hill gets on the field. Dobbins is super explosive. He's going to be the guy. You know how much they run the football there. My question is, Greg and I know this because we've checked into this. We know that they wanted to expand their passing game last year, but you couldn't without an offseason. I'm not saying they're going to be throwing the ball 35 times a game. That will never happen, based on the way that they want to run the offense. But I'm interested to see what they do that's different from last year to this year.
So am I, because as of now, the way they are on their offense, their pass game is extremely limited. I've talked to numerous coaches, defensive coaches, who believe that once they get into a game where they have to throw the football in much more of a drop back fashion, and the run game cannot be the driving force, that they're simply not capable of doing that at this point. So this is a big off season for Lamar Jackson and the pass game overall, because you can get as many wide receivers as you want. And they did. They added Sammy Watkins. They drafted Rashad Bateman. They drafted Tylan Wallace. You can do all that. But unless the offense changes, receivers will go to Baltimore and die.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Wow.
I mean, it should be all about the outside. Like, what is Lamar? What can he do on the outside? We know he loves throwing it in the middle of the field to Mark Andrews. Now we need to challenge defenses, more horizontally, right? I mean, that's kind of the point. Can a guy like Rashad Bateman help out? He can line up in a variety of spots. Feels like he could be maybe some of the glue to kind of put things and hold things together here outside of just Andrews in the middle of the field and your shot plays to Hollywood Brown.
Well, John, I feel like if Bateman is as good as we think he is, and don't forget they added Tylan Wallace too, who should not have fallen to day 3. I love Tylan Wallace. If they increase their pass rate by even like 1.5% to 2%, Lamar Jackson he already has QB1 in his range of outcomes, but he has like ceiling breaking 28 fantasy points per game in his range of outcomes. Because this, regardless of his accuracy issues, which have been prevalent for the last 2 years, and especially were prevalent last year, Lamar is like one of the most efficient quarterbacks on a per play basis. He over the last 2 years, his touchdown rate is 8%. It was 9%. Yep. It was 9% in 2019. It dipped to 7% in 2020, which was still like top 5 in the league.
Pretty decent.
Yeah, man. I love.
I'm with you. No, I've been with you all
year.
year. Yeah. I'm all into. How about though, Adam, the O-line? Might this be a problem with Alejandro Villanueva?
It's a good position for him.
Right tackle.
He knew the couple teams backed off of signing him as a left tackle. So to get a contract that's decent, this is what he's doing. I find it interesting that the Giants, who have a bad offensive line, or are very average at best, didn't think much of Kevin Zeitler. They didn't want him back. The Ravens jumped in immediately and really gave him a strong contract. So they clearly see what the Giants don't see.
Yeah.
Ronnie Stanley is back he had a major injury. He's back. Greg's better probably to talk about the other two. We'll see about the other spots, but it's an okay O-line.
Good
I
O-line.
remember Nick Boyle's back,
that'll help. Good blocker.
Who blocks. That's what he does.
They got a lot of tight ends, I'll tell you that.
I know, and I'll tell you what, Josh Oliver, I know the guy's never played really, but he can run.
He's a fascinating guy. He's an athletic tight end.
Yeah.
I liked him coming out of college.
Greg, real quick, back to Dobbins. Seemed like Dobbins was, this is what we thought he would be, right? Any surprises? Anything stand out to you from Dobbins last year?
No, I think, don't forget, it's a run-based offense that puts tremendous stress and conflict on a defense. He's in a great spot. Look at Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards carries 140 times a year, averages 5 yards a carry.
Every year.
Yeah, he's done it for 3 straight years now. It's a function of Lamar and the offense. That's what this is. The foundation of this offense is the run game. The big question is, how much do they move away from that foundation to try to generate a more consistent week-to-week pass game that also puts conflict on defenses? Clearly I don't know what kind of contract Sammy Watkins got. Adam, you would know that.
It's light. Yeah, it's very light.
But obviously they spent a first-round pick on a receiver for the second time in 3 years. So if you're going to do that, I think you got to start expanding your pass game.
Yeah, no doubt. And as bad as it was last year, they were 7th out of 32, obviously, in points for. Do you feel optimistic, Greg, that Lamar can, return to form, take a step forward, improve.
Well, Lamar, first of all, from a fantasy perspective, Lamar will always put up numbers, and we know he's a good quarterback. That's not the point of this conversation. The point of this conversation is that coaches in this league know that if you get them in a situation where they have to throw the football, they can't do it very well,
Right.
which has nothing to do with fantasy numbers. So they have to be in a situation, because that's happened in the playoffs in each of the last 2 years,
Yeah.
and they've been knocked out of the playoffs. And the goal is to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I do feel like if they are playing from behind, you've got a much better chance this year. It was just a bad year all around for Lamar. He was down a little bit. I thought Mark Andrews was a little off from the year before. Now you had Sammy and Bateman and all that. It all looks real good on paper. Defensively, they're in good shape once again. Overall, I mean, no real weaknesses here on the defense. A lot of good players here. I'm still waiting for that Jalen Ferguson to do something of note. I thought he was a pretty good prospect here. The corner depth.
They got a lot of linemen. I mean, well, of course, now that they've lost Matthew Judon, we'll see how it all plays out and who gets more snaps. Tyus Bowser is a very athletic kid. He'll probably replace Judon.
And away, they got the kid away in the draft.
Oh yeah, and that.
Jason Oweh, yeah,
he's a freak.
Yeah,
but he has to learn how to rush the quarterback. He's very athletic. He's ridiculously athletic.
Taven Young, was he always here?
Yeah, he was always there. He's a Temple.
Yeah,
that's hard to believe because
I'd hurt.
I'd missed him in like 2019.
He gets hurt a lot, but he's a pretty tough, feisty player.
Let's head on over to Cincinnati. And, Adam and I have talked to multiple insider types. Adam, as you know, like I've asked multiple people, have they done enough on the offensive line? It all comes down to that for protecting Burrow and, blocking it up a little bit for Bro Mixon, for God's sakes. They all say, yeah, but, I guess we'll see about Jackson Carman and all that. But Riley Reif is a decent run blocker, at least on the right side.
And Bobby Hart, listen, Bobby Hart was a mistake. That was a mistake from the beginning. As you mentioned, hopefully Carman could start at guard. Riley Reif is an upgrade, not a great one, but he's an upgrade over Bobby Hart. The interior of their offensive line was dreadful last season. That's what teams told me who graded their tape for free agency when they grade lines, they grade everything they see. It was probably the worst offensive line in football. Not probably was.
And they've addressed it in their mind. I mean,
they've done what they can. They could still do more. Hopefully it'll be better. I mean, how many times do we have to talk about Joe Mixon running into a wall? I mean, that's what the last 2 years has been like. And they
Greg, do you view this as a passing team? I look at Boyd, Higgins, and Chase and say all three are going to get 100 plus targets.
For sure.
I would say probably yes. I think the O-line will help dictate how, just exactly how much. But Burrow, I have it on good reporting that Burrow's arm strength apparently has improved dramatically from last year to this year.
Well, he wants to do more downfield stuff too. And
they got Chase, Boyd, and Higgins, and there's very few people who didn't think Jamar Chase could step in and play right now. So that's a pretty good group. And Auden Tate's been a nice player for them because he's gotten snaps over the last couple of years. They got some weapons here. What they're lacking is a tight end. So that means you're right, John. Those receivers are getting targets.
Yep. Graham, Chase, Boyd, Higgins, are you kind of the old, I'll take the cheapest one? Is that where you are with these three?
I was talking to our good doctor, Mr. Porras, last week, and I think there was a report that came out that Burrow was close to like 75, 80%. He was throwing with like a sleeve on his leg. And Edwin and I both kind of agreed, like, there's a chance Burrow's not ready until like week 4. They just like play it super safe with him and give him like an extra month. But that
I don't know about that. I don't know about that at all. I don't know where you. Yeah, that's not happening. If he's taking the reps in camp, he's
playing. I agree.
Yeah. No, I know. I'm just saying, like, they just slow roll it as much as possible. But back to the pass catchers. Yeah, I mean, and when Burrow was healthy, they were not the most, but one of the 5 most pass heavy teams, regardless of game script. They threw it 62% of the time when the game was within a score. I was up there with like the Chiefs, the Bucks. This all three of the receivers are going to get fed. I don't really have like a strong take on who to target though. I'm a little higher on Higgins in my best ball ranks than I think consensus. Maybe a little bit lower on Boyd. But Chase is tough right now because he's like a 5th round pick.
Yeah, it's a bit much.
Higgins is probably my favorite target. But yeah, it kind of just depends on, who the best value is. I'm not really going to a draft saying I've got to draft one of these 3 guys.
Our guy Joe Dolan, by the way, Graham, apparently his internet just died, but
no.
It's all good. We can pick him up here. Joe Mixon, we know the drill. The guy's got to stay healthy, block it up a little bit. He's a stud talent. Graham, if he's ever going to have a true breakout, this has got to be it, right? I feel like this has got to be it.
Yeah, and no Gio Bernard now, so he's going to get all that passing down work, which is humongous. That's been the biggest thing, John, that's been holding him back, as he's been behind Gio in passing down situations. They use Gio a lot as a pass blocker too. So yeah, it's going to be mixing on all 3 downs, and the offensive line still is a concern. Burrow's knee is still a concern, but I mean, volume-wise, I think this is the year where Mixon's the workhorse, and you can now get him at probably the cheapest cost, at least in the last 2 years. I mean, he's a mid-second round pick right now.
What was his injury last year?
He had a foot problem that the Bengals, I think they messed up.
Yeah, they shut him down. Yeah, but
they said it was a sprain at first, and then he missed like a month, and then they ended up just having to shut him down. It may have been because they were not competitive too, because they lost Burrow.
And I still think, and again, I never knock coaches, but I still think there's more you can do with him in the pass game.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Mixon was like still. I don't think anybody's ever going to touch some of Mixon's yards graded numbers that I've found. I mean, he was such a fantastic prospect.
He's very unique, because usually I don't find guys of his size as versatile as he is. He's really gifted. I'm just hopeful that the offensive line, I hope to get to their camp this summer. I'm really hopeful that their offensive line gets it together. Frank Pollard, John, I think is the coach, right?
Yeah. Well, second stint there.
Yeah.
Yep. Also, they've got a million guys behind Mixon. P. Ryan, Travion Williams.
They're all just guys.
That's an open competition.
I think that Chris Evans out of Michigan's really intriguing, though.
He can play on passing downs. He missed 2019 because of like academic issues, and he barely played last year with COVID and stuff. But he was like their primary passing down back in 18.
Yep. And then Puka Williams is here. I thought he would get drafted.
He's an explosive kid.
Mm-hmm.
He's small. He's explosive.
Yeah,
Were you
tiny.
surprised he went undrafted, Greg?
I was. He was a draftable player in my view.
Yeah, exactly. Defensively, do we really care? Let's be honest. I'm just keeping it real. No, we don't. We don't really care about the Bengals for fantasy. We'll worry about, how good of a matchup they are for our offensive players later. So let's move on to Cleveland and, status quo. I mean, there's no real changes here, Greg. We know what they want to do. We know it's run base and all that, but I'm sure they want to expand things. I think the big thing is downfield throws. That I think is what they're looking to do. We'll see if Beckham can stay healthy.
Well, the big thing is, to me, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, is who becomes the number 3. I mean, Higgins has been there and he's been solid. But they have Peoples-Jones. They drafted Anthony Schwartz with a 3rd round pick. Now, he's not a volume target, but that kid can run. So, that to me, and I don't know how Graham feels about it in terms of fantasy, but that to me is the big question, is who ultimately becomes the number 3 as the season progresses.
I'm going Higgins there. He does click pretty well with Baker. The problem, though, to your point, Greg, like he doesn't have a ton of juice. Schwartz from the slot does. And Peoples-Jones, his straight line speed is pretty good. But
and
Graham,
he's big too.
Yeah, he is big. Graham, I don't think we're that concerned about it for fantasy. It's more of a in-season thing. We'll see what we see there, right? I mean, you're not real interested here in the 3rd receiver pre-draft.
Yeah,
preseason.
I think you nailed it. DPJ is going to be kind of rotational. Higgins will be rotational. This is going to be a 12 personnel team again. Yep. Hooper. Kind of disappointed us last year. I actually really like Cooper for best ball because he's literally stolen free right now, like 15th, 16th round. But I mean, they're going to play Bryant. They'll play Njoku. Once again, I mean, Stefanski has plenty of pieces to kind of move and play to his, play off his run game, which is what I fully expect them to do again. I mean, they're going to be, in the top five teams and run rate in all situations.
Well, one thing I do want to add, and John and I probably have talked about this before, with Beckham Jr. returning and Donovan Peoples-Jones, was able to play last season. We don't know about Anthony Schwartz's ability to play yet, but I do wonder if Jarvis Landry will be inside more. Inside more as a slot receiver, which is really his best position. Do wonder what they'll do there.
Sure.
Well, that would depend, I think, on the development of Peoples-Jones.
Yeah, that's
Certainly
why I
line
brought it up.
outside.
Exactly. I'm going to be looking into that. I'm very interested.
You're 100% right, Adam.
I don't have a great feel for the tight ends. I mean, I loved Bryant last year. He was very good, but Hooper did come on down the stretch. I guess Njoku's the real monkey wrench here. I mean, Adam, what's his role?
No, well, they surprisingly, very surprised they could have cut him in March. First day of March was when his salary became fully guaranteed of $6 million. They kept him, which tells you once again, and Graham's right, they're not going to change. They're always going to be 12 personnel, a heavy base run game with 2 tight ends. But I found it interesting, and they wanted to, and I don't have the stats to back it up. I know talking to the Browns at the start of last season, they wanted to use Njoku at the X.
Exactly.
I do wonder if they do a little of that.
They needed him with OBJ out, and
but even coming into the season, they wanted to do that because you're seeing that trend. We've talked about Waller at the X and other teams using tight ends at X. I do wonder if he'll do that more and maybe to get him on the field because $6 million for a guy who barely contributes is ridiculous.
Graham, we all know Nick Chubb is good. Clearly, if you have the gift of sight, you know it. But are you with these people? Like, there's like this mini army of people who are taking him very proactively, like 7 overall. I don't get it. I don't see how you give the guy more than 30 catches.
Yeah. Hunt's obviously going to be involved once again, not only as a receiver, but on the early down stuff. It was Chubb like 58-42 with the early down stuff. And Chubb is just that damn good. I mean, you give him the ball 18, 20 times, you give Hunt the ball 10 to 12, and you got the best two in the league. But yeah, I thought Chubb was being a little overdrafted last year in the late first, and that kind of ended up being wrong just because, so many running backs died. If he's a top 8-9 pick again, that's a bit much for a back who's not going to get any passing down work outside of a couple screens.
Joe, you're back. Welcome back. What do you think of Chubb? Like mid-second round pick, to be fair, as opposed to like taking him at 7 overall over.
I'm willing to take him late first, early second round. I think you view again, you look at this guy and his talent level, it's stupid. I mean, it's incredible how good he is. He's in that Cam Akers, Najee Harris kind of range for me. And again, like we were saying with best ball, if I do 10 drafts and I have 10 spots at the 12-13, the first second round turn, I might go Akers Harris one draft. I might go Akers Chubb another draft. I might go Chubb Harris one draft. So I have him in that range. I'm just worried about, again, Kareem Hunt being there. I mean, if Kareem Hunt wasn't there, we'd all take him top 3 overall and feel really good about it. But the talent is there. He's produced despite it. He's not somebody who's going to lose goal line carries to his quarterback. I'm totally cool with Nick Chubb as my RB1, depending on where I draft.
Yeah, I think people are going a little overboard. To me, it's all about plugging in the catch totals as it relates to PPR fantasy points and all that. But let's move on to the defense real quick, Adam, because dare I say they may have some fantasy juice if Newsome works out.
Yeah, they're going to be better. I know they knew they had a sort of a mishmash at linebacker last year. They feel a lot better about it. Delpit's coming back from his Achilles injury. We'll see how he does. They're very high on him. John Johnson comes in, pretty good free agent safety. Ronnie Harrison did a good job filling in last season. Newsome is a first-round pick. Troy Hill, they've fortified their secondary, which was not good last year. They've really addressed it. The only question I have is, Greg has told us about Clowney. He's not a good pass rusher. Tack McKinley's done nothing as a former first-round pick.
Yeah.
Helping Garrett out on the other side is my question. I just don't know if they're going to have enough of a consistent pass rush other than Garrett. But I agree, though. They've really helped themselves this offseason in secondary and linebacker.
Yeah, I think they have a chance. We've got them in our top.
For fantasy, man, some weeks they were very good with turnovers. Did they have a ton of turnovers last year?
I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I plugged in digits that were very fair based on last year and the improvements, and they came out at 11. Anything else here on the Browns? I mean, we've covered it all. I don't know how we could talk about Harrison Bryant's upside this year. I don't know if he has any.
No, but one thing on Mayfield, so he obviously played well, right?
Oh yeah,
he put himself and Stefanski's and Van Pelt did a great job of understanding what he is as a quarterback. So using your question, because you're always wondering, John, can this guy be better? Because you and I don't agree on Josh Allen. We're slightly different in our thought process. How much better can Mayfield be for fantasy now that Beckham's back?
Yeah, Greg, and to piggyback, you told us for the first month of the season that he was not comfortable. He was not pulling the trigger. He was like slow processing. And then he turned a corner and it seemed like he actually balled out down the stretch here. I mean, how good was Baker down the stretch in your mind and compared to how much he grew from earlier in the season?
Well, I think that's just comfort with a new offense and an offense that actually fits him very well. And I would expect with a normal off season that will continue to grow. Baker Mayfield is a good player. He throws the ball well. He's got pretty quick feet. He's not a runner per se, but he can move a little bit. But he's if you go back to what he was in college, he was a rhythm player. The ball came out, and a lot of people thought that he was a movement guy, and he really wasn't. He played in structure, in rhythm, and with timing, and that's what the Kevin Stefanski offense is, and it presents those kinds of reads and throws for him. So I would expect Baker Mayfield to continue to incrementally improve. And if Beckham can be healthy, it just gives them more options in the pass game, more dimensions in the pass game.
What do you think of his ability to throw the deep ball? They're run based, they're run heavy. They want to go deep a little bit more, put defenses on their heels. What do you think of his ability?
Well, deep ball is a relative term, John.
3 years.
It depends on what kind of deep ball you're talking about. I mean, normally you're not just dropping back and winging it down the field. Deep ball can be a number of things. Yeah, you can throw a go route, you can throw a post. These are all structured design plays, and a lot of those throws are spot throws. They're not just drop back and heave it.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you this: how much? I'm assuming you believe he's a little more talented than Kirk Cousins, but how much more talented than Kirk Cousins?
I think he throws it better than Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of what I mean.
Yeah.
Consistently making more downfield throws. I think that's what they want. That's what they want to grow this year.
Baker has a sneaky kind of strong arm.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
It's not like a top 5, top 8 arm, but I mean, he can make.
And the way
I think
that
his arm,
structures.
what I would say about his arm is it's more live than power. Like he's not a power thrower, but I think there's some juice to his arm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hey, Adam, real quick, have you heard anything about if they're going to get a deal done with Baker this offseason?
I would be very surprised if they did.
Okay.
Because they don't need to. Now I know Andrew Berry, the GM, didn't really think that they're connected. What happened with Wentz and Goff, but I think teams are learning now that because Mayfield's been up and down. I mean, certainly looks like the hour's way up, but considering the way that he played 2 years ago, and we know the reasons. We've been over this because of the coaching. Right. Things right now are in a good place. There's really no reason for them to do it. The reason why teams do it early is because they get a discount. They get a discount on signing a guy early. That's why you would do it, but I'd be very surprised. It wouldn't make much sense to me to do it right now, but this is the time that you do it. This is when Wentz did his extension in June of what was it, 19? Yeah, wow. It's crazy.
Final team to cover here. I know we're all probably late for lunch here.
Yep.
Pittsburgh Steelers. And Matt Canada takes over, Adam, as the offensive coordinator. And I guess we all assume when that happened, I guess we're not going to sling it all over the field like we did with Randy Fichtner. Then all of a sudden, now we got Najee Harris. So, how much of the offense do you think is going to change? Obviously, we're going to balance it out here.
I would expect them to stretch the field more. I'm not seeing a lot of dink and dunk. Part of it is because Roethlisberger's almost 2 years removed from the elbow surgery. So I expect them to expand it downfield more. I think from what I understand, his arm is fine. They don't feel like they need to do that. The one question, and you and I were talking about this this morning on our show. Their offensive line's got some serious question marks.
I would agree with that.
Serious question marks.
Yeah.
And that they're not going to be, I based on when I've done a little background check on Canada and what they want, they do not want it to be as pass happy. No. In terms of volume, I don't have the stats in front. What was Roethlisberger per game on pass attempts?
Bet you he was 42.
Right. They're not wanting that anywhere close to that. I'm thinking 30, maybe mid 30s, which is
right,
maybe a little bit above the league average. Unless they're behind, which their defense should be still pretty good. He's going to be way down in pass attempts because that's what they want. And Najee Harris is going to have to get the football. I remember we talked to Zach Banner on NFL radio. He was really disappointed in the run game, and he felt bad that he couldn't play. I expect him to make a commitment to it and be less pass happy.
Yep.
So that's
40.1 attempts last year in 15. 40.5 actually. 40 and a half.
I would expect to be 33, 35.
That's
that
too
area,
many.
maybe 35. What's that?
That's too many.
Well,
and also,
you also have right now this year, but Juju's back. That was a surprise.
That's a surprise.
That I didn't see coming. It doesn't mean they're going to throw it 40 times a game. They're not going to. There were some weeks, and Greg talked to us about it. It was ridiculous. How many times they'd have Roethlisberger drop back? It was also very predictable. That was the other problem. There was no rhythm to their pass game. None.
It also seemed like they had no confidence in the downfield throws based on the play calling and all that.
See, I had people tell me that would know that they did not think Ben was ready yet with his coming off his surgery. But then what was the game where people joked that Ben took over the play calling because they started slinging it when they were behind? Was it the playoff game against the Colts? They threw the ball downfield.
I mean, he threw a tutty to Deontay down the stretch. That was real nice on the right side.
I just know that there was a point where his arm clearly looked like it was back. When they do throw it, based on what I've heard, they're going to be throwing it downfield more.
Greg, confidence level based on that comment. I'm sure you saw some moments where you maybe question the strength of the arm.
Throwing it downfield doesn't mean you're throwing it more. That's the thing. I mean,
exactly.
I think people
that's what I was saying.
Too.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, look, far be it from me to say what's going on in the minds of the Steelers coaches and personnel department. But if you draft Najee Harris with the first pick in the draft and Pat Freiermuth with the second pick in the draft, I got to believe that you believe as a team that you're going to run the ball a lot more than they did a year ago. Najee Harris is a volume back, okay? And Roethlisberger, to me, at this point in his career, is not a quarterback you want dropping back 40 plus times a game by choice. So to me, in an ideal world, now the offensive line is a question. That's a given. But to me, it seems you want to line up in such a way. And Roethlisberger's not been real receptive to playing under center. That's going to be another question for this offseason and as we go through training camp. But you want to be in a situation where you're going to get 8 in the box and you can work the outside with guys who can run, Claypool and Deontay Johnson. And that's how you can throw it down the field, by design, with manufactured, schemed vertical shots. That's different than just putting him in the gun and saying, let's start throwing it all around the yard. So that's what I think they're going to do.
No shortage of viable options with Juju back. And then, of course, Claypool exceeded expectations. Deontay still have James Washington, who can sneak it downfield here and there. So they're fairly loaded, and they're going to be more balanced. A lot of talent in the skill positions, period.
And a tight end with Ebron and Freiermuth.
Period. It's just a question of this O-line. But it sounds like, Greg, they can perhaps mask the deficiencies of the O-line with balancing it out, savvy play calling, working off the run. If Harris has success.
Well, one thing about Harris is he's a contact runner, so he can gain yards even if it's not blocked really well. He's a physical contact
Exactly.
runner.
A little bit of a creator for a big guy.
A little bit.
Good
Greg,
receiver.
What did you think of the two linemen they drafted, Kendrick Green and Dan Moore? I know you watched both of them.
I like both of them quite a bit.
Yeah.
Kendrick Green, I really like. He played both center and guard. I don't know where they have him. Obviously he's not going to play right guard to catch.
They have him working out at center, Greg, because the big thing is he has Pouncey's number, and Ben said today he's confused or something.
Well, I like Kendrick Green a lot.
Yeah.
Dan Moore, I did too. He came from Texas A&M. I thought he was a really good prospect relative to where he got drafted. Because all he did when I watched his tape was block all these SEC pass rushers, and he did it well. So I thought he was a legitimate left tackle prospect. And again, without knowing the kid, given who they have listed at the tackle positions right now, if he has a good offseason and training camp, I think he would have a chance to start at left tackle.
Backup running back spot here is a little up in the air. Anthony McFarland, is he the backup or is he just viewed as a complimentary guy?
Yeah, complimentary. Now, could he wind up taking the job? Sure, because Benny Snell really struggled, and your guy Balaj is there, so the job's open, and Jalen Samuels is still there.
Wow. Oh, it's unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, this guy's done nothing. It's incredible.
McFarland will have a chance, and when they get to training camp, he'll have a chance to work his way in there to a pretty good role.
I just don't see him being able to carve out a nice little complimentary role as they look to get Harris going.
Well, get it, but give some explosiveness to complement Harris.
Yeah. Defensively, I don't know. I've been on their defense the last 2 years. I'm still fine with them. We think we have them at 3. I feel like a drop off is coming. Like Adam, there's some concerns in this secondary.
Well, corner, Joe Hayden's up there. Yeah, the one issue they have on defense is that corner opposite Hayden. Yeah. It's a little questionable. They got the one kid who got in trouble off the field, and then what do they really have? I was surprised that they didn't really address it. That was a little bit of a surprise to me.
That in the O-line.
Well, that could be, look, from a talent standpoint, other than DeCastro, where's the talent on their offensive line?
It's a good point. It's a legitimate question.
Well, I know the kid at left tackle, our guy out there. Yeah. I know. I talked to a couple of beat writers who do think pretty highly of him.
We had to play last year. I mean, we'll see full time. I don't know.
It did pretty well, actually. So that's the storyline to keep an eye on. Otherwise, pretty loaded. And Harris is good. They'll run the ball.
One thing we should talk about from a fantasy standpoint here is if the Steelers aren't going to be dropping Ben back 40 times a game, which they obviously don't want to do.
Yep.
What does that do to somebody like Deontay Johnson, who, I mean, his entire fantasy production, and we like Deontay Johnson, but his entire fantasy production was based on volume. If they're going to throw the ball downfield a little bit more, not to say Deontay can't go get it, I'm beginning to wonder if Chase Claypool might be the best bet here.
Wow. I don't know. That's certainly a fair point and a good point. I feel like we have him at 19, Deontay. Normally a guy who fits that profile, we're going to rank higher, but I'm somewhat conservative. I'll open it up to the floor. I mean, we've got him at 82 grabs. Is that too much? Because Graham, wouldn't Juju back limit Claypool's snappage though?
Actually, it was James Washington that limited Juju snaps. What they did is they rotated Washington in like mid-season, which I kind of didn't understand. I mean, I know Big Ben and Washington are boys, but I don't know. Beyond the offensive line, I'm actually more concerned that Roethlisberger's arm's just shot. Like when they threw beyond 10 yards last year, Roethlisberger was in the bottom 10 of the NFL in accuracy. Like if you look at any type of metric, and that's on top of the fact that his average depth of target was like down near Drew Breesian levels. Like I hear you that they want to open it up more. They want to throw deeper more. They want to scheme that up more. And I'm sure they do. But I think what will end up inevitably happening over, now a 17 game season is I just don't think Roethlisberger has the pop in his arm to really stretch the defense consistently for 17 games. I think they're gonna have to go back to some of the shallow stuff with Deontay and Juju. And I think a part of the reason they drafted Harris in the first round is so Big Ben has a binky, to kind of check down to. I mean, Najee Harris, man, is like one of the best pass catching running backs I've seen after the catch in the last 6 years. I mean, the dude, broke Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara. They're the top 2 guys I've ever charted in missed tackles forced per reception. Harris like blew them out of the water. I just think that this offense, they're going to throw it. They're going to try and stretch the field with Claypool a little, but I still think at the end of the day, this is going to be a very shallow average depth of target team and just a run after the catch team. And they have the guys to do that between Deontay and Harris and Claypool.
Yeah, Deontay is a tough call. I mean, 88 grabs last year in 15 games. He did miss parts of other games, so I thought my 82 projection was fair. But Joe mentioned Claypool. Yeah, I mean, he could be more productive for fantasy with the
Claypool
touchdowns.
definitely has the bigger ceiling. He has the bigger ceiling for sure. From
Who
like a
does?
weekly. Claypool definitely has a bigger ceiling from like a weekly perspective. Like,
Right.
you know, I mean, he's got that 150 for 5 grabs and 2 touchdowns, whereas Deontay doesn't really have that.
Also, Juju is not easy to break down either, by the way.
Juju's been like one of the hardest players to figure out this offseason, I think. I really don't know what to do with him. Because he's
I
so
didn't know what
cheap
to do
now.
with him last year.
He's like a 7th or 8th round pick now.
I mean, we've got him at 79 catches for 705 and 6 tutties. If they change the offense a little bit, will they use him a little bit more, less like a running back, like a handoff? I mean, his average depth of the target was like a yard last year, it seemed like. A lot of weapons, a lot of confusing, hard to really come up with a bunch of strong definitive statements other than Najee Harris is good. And that's about it, really. I mean, Deontay, needs to clean it up a little bit, but I still believe in him. I'm still going to take him over Claypool, but Joe, you make a good point. And my point is also good that we're done and we're wrapping it up here for the day. Just wrapped up the AFC East and North. And if you missed the NFC, you could catch it on the site, fantasypoints.com on demand, fly on the wall. You sit and watch us, talk through every team in the league. Tomorrow we'll be back for the AFC South and West to wrap it up. Don't forget the promo code if you haven't subscribed yet for an early bird special is early bird miss 21. Early bird miss 21. Use that promo code and save 10% off. We thank our guy Ben Kukanis on the other side of the glass. He'll be doing some post-production stuff as well. I'm going to wrap it here for Joe Dolan and Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan and Graham Barfield. Thanks a lot to those guys. Thanks for watching out there on the interwebs. I'm John Hansen. We'll catch you tomorrow with the final installment of the fantasypoints.com off-season powwow.